That right there is the updated 2025 version of Mercedes electric S-Class, which is called the EQS. This car is widely known for its truly extreme range, and I will also be doing my Odensafe challenge around the beautiful fjord, diving into the car's energy consumption, efficiency, and so on. But I'll only be doing that in a follow-up video to this one, which will come later. And I'm doing that because this car is really about so much more than just extreme range and long-distance capabilities, offering a broader experience overall. For example, there are so many insane features in this car that I've never experienced before. For instance, just the fact that there's fragrance in the climate control system. On top of that, this is an EQS, the electric Mercedes S-Class. And normally the Mercedes S-Class is like a window into the future. What you see in an S-Class today is what you'll find in more affordable cars for us mortals in, say, 10 years. This car is luxury wrapped in luxury, a bit like its probably biggest competitor, the BMW i7. In fact, it's a car I drove almost exactly a year ago, in April 2024, and in this video, I'll also be referring to my experiences with that car in some parts. Let's get started. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's right, the EQS is now more than 5 meters long. And I actually think, especially in this 2025 version where it's just received this facelift, which is easiest to recognize at the front, it's got the star now, and it's also got this plastic front at the end. Yes, it gives the car a bit more of that Mercedes look, and I'm definitely a fan of that. Do I think it's become a beautiful car? Well, actually, I do think so. However, in my opinion, the problem with a car like this is that it will very, very often look like an EQE. And it's hard to tell the difference when it's driving by. And if you've burned through 1.6 million kroner, which is what this car cost with all the extras, then maybe I think you'd want to show that you've actually bought the EQS. And if you compare it to something like a BMW i7, for example, that car is much more distinctive. It might even look a bit more stately when it's driving by, although I think the i7 is ugly. Another thing that characterizes an EQE and an EQS is these door handles. They pop out when you approach the car, and when you're driving, they sit completely flush, fully integrated into the car's design, so they don't create any wind resistance. I do wonder a bit about those door handles. If it freezes, it might become a bit of a hassle. And even though the car has this profile where it can actually be a bit hard to tell if it's driving forwards or backwards, I still think it has something elegant, especially down over the C-pillar. Almost coupe-like. I'm actually really, really fond of it. Another thing I love is this little rear spoiler, and the whole taillight setup here, which actually looks pretty great as well when the car's driving at night. It's really gorgeous. Then there's a nice little detail. The reversing camera is hidden here behind the Mercedes logo. That means especially when you're driving in winter, it doesn't get wet and filthy and so on. Although I'm well aware that this is a feature you can also find in a 10-year-old Hyundai i30, but it's clever, and not everyone does it. Then there's a small downside. If you have a tow bar on this car, it almost looks silly, because at most you'll be towing a garden trailer or something like that. 750 kilos, with or without brakes. Then there's the trunk here, which has a top hinge tailgate, making it incredibly easy to access this lavish trunk. It's practically a ballroom. Back here, you definitely won't be lacking space at all. There's also this extra compartment down here where you have space for your charging cable, which you'll need since the car doesn't have a frunk. You can't open the hood without tools. This is a well-known feature of the EQE and EQS, and it's also why there's that little funny hatch on the left front fender where you can pour in windshield washer fluid. I've never really understood that concept. Just make a frunk, it's better. The right rear seat. That's the place you want to be in a car like this. Well, unless you're like me and would rather drive the car. But the right rear seat, that's where you can sit, where you can quickly give an order to your private chauffeur. And overall, this car, it's not designed for a country boy like me. It's maybe more for a minister or, I don't know, maybe even a royal who's supposed to sit in the back seat of this car. What you do notice, though, is that there is an incredible amount of space. You have 4-zone climate control, and then you have these screens, which are not quite as impressive as the gigantic 32 or 33-inch screen that's mounted in the ceiling of a BMW i7. I was honestly a bit more impressed by that one. The content on these screens, on the other hand, is really good. You can do everything from keeping an eye on the car's consumption, charging process, and so on. All those nerdy things that I personally enjoy keeping track of. You can operate the navigation system, which means you can change the destination and without having to say anything, let your private chauffeur know that now you want to go somewhere else. There are also games, entertainment, you can watch YouTube, there's Spotify, Tidal, you can download apps, all these things. I can't praise this enough. It works really smoothly. Then there's this extra tablet which sits down here in the center console and you can take it with you. Basically, it has the same content as well. Super cool. You have cup holders, you have wireless charging for your mobile phone, you have massage, heating and cooling in the rear seats, which you can of course also control from the screens here. And this car also has a seat package where you can adjust the seats just a little bit, which is also really, really nice. This car is built on a dedicated electric vehicle platform, but funnily enough, it still has a little drive shaft tunnel down here. Those doors, there are a lot of people who have an opinion about them. So do I. They're not for me. I think those kinds of doors are silly. But in a car like this, I think they belong. This is the space for a private chauffeur. I enjoy sitting here because I like driving cars. But most owners of this car will be sitting in the right rear seat, which I just mentioned. And in that case, it's pretty cool that, for example, you can open the right rear door just by pressing a button here. I think that's super, super cool. And it belongs in a car like this, which is why the feature is also found, for example, in a BMW i7. Otherwise, I have to say, you are surrounded by luxurious materials. If you remember how an S-Class used to set itself apart from all other cars 20 or 30 years ago, well, that distance just isn't there anymore. What is also really, really good is that, for example, you now have this hyperscreen. It's now standard in an EQS. Previously, it was an optional extra costing over 100,000 krona. The hyperscreen is basically 3 screens stretching from A-pillar to A-pillar. You have the screen in front of the driver, your instrument cluster, then you have the large central screen here, and you have the screen over on the right, which basically works just like the 2 screens in the back, and the small extra tablet in the center console. So the screen over on the right is designed so that if I move my eyes over to it, it interrupts whatever's on the screen. And of course, that's annoying for those who are sitting and watching something. Another super, super cool thing is that what your 3 passengers, for example, are enjoying in the car can be shared internally. Otherwise, I'll just focus on what I think is truly interesting. It's the car's navigation system. If you go into the navigation system here and, for example, set a route to the Eiffel Tower, that's what I usually do. So first of all, it creates all sorts of super, super nice graphics. And then, of course, the car also automatically includes charging stops. You get an estimated state of charge, and the car preconditions the battery before you arrive at your charging stop. So the car charges perfectly every time. If you then go in and look at the 3 charging stops, you can see here at the moment we can see it here, boom, boom, boom. I have about 45% state of charge right now. But if we go and take a look, it says I need 3 charging stops to get to Paris. And I'll spend half an hour, 34 minutes, and 21 minutes at each stop. So less than an hour and a half of breaks to get to the Eiffel Tower. And I'm actually starting here with less than half a battery. That's awesome. And that's really one of the things this car can do exceptionally well. It's all about covering long distances quickly, and that's something I'll also be testing in the follow-up video here. Then there's the Burmester sound system. It actually sounds insanely good too. Is it as good as the big systems in Teslas? Well, maybe not quite, but it's very, very close. So all in all, I have to say that this is truly one of the absolute best interiors I've ever had the genuine pleasure of spending time in. This EQS, ever since it was launched about 3 years ago, has been built on the same dedicated electric vehicle platform as the EQE, a platform that's called the EVA2 platform. The entire construction of the car has been heavily focused on aerodynamics, which you can also see in the car's profile. And according to Mercedes, these small design changes with the star on the nose, the new front, and so on, have not affected the car's energy efficiency. The car has gradually become more energy efficient over its 3-year lifespan. Primarily, the biggest advantage that has been achieved, which isn't particularly significant, is that the car has been equipped with a heat pump. The car now has a WLTP rated consumption of 165 watt-hours per kilometer. So if you take a stripped down car, like this with no extra features, will have a WLTP rated range of 815 kilometers. This one has extra equipment and slightly larger wheels. Therefore, it has a WLTP rated range of 777 kilometers. This enormous range is primarily achieved thanks to the technology around the battery pack, which has simply improved over time. Previously, an EQS like this had a net capacity of 108 kilowatt hours. That has now been increased to 118 kilowatt hours, so that's about an 8 or 9% increase. And it's quite normal to see that kind of improvement within a span of about 3 years. As I usually say, I believe in evolution rather than revolution, and that's why they've now managed to fit these 8 or 9% more capacity into the battery pack within the same space. It's still a 400-volt architecture, and it still uses a cobalt-based chemistry. So this battery pack, as far as I know and as far as I can remember, is the largest battery pack I've ever shown here on Bila TV. And as mentioned, it has a 400-volt architecture, which means you can be a little bit challenged when it comes to charging time. The thing is, the CCS standard we use for charging, among other places in Denmark, is limited to 500 amps. And when you have 400 volts and 500 amps, that gives you 200,000 watts. In other words, 200 kilowatts. So that's the peak power when you're charging this car. In practice, it might be a bit higher because as more current flows into the battery, it actually goes a little above 400 volts. But according to Mercedes, the charging time from 10 to 80% is half an hour. I'll be testing that in the upcoming video. I'll also do my Odense challenge around the fjord and look closer at the numbers regarding consumption and so on. That way, you'll get a real sense of how this car actually charges on a long trip. Since we're talking about charging, it's also worth mentioning AC charging, that is alternating current charging. That's the type of charging you'll typically do in your own driveway, but also, for example, when you're destination charging, if you're at a meeting for a few hours or at a library or swimming pool where there are these type 2 chargers. This car comes standard with an 11 kilowatt onboard charger, and that will usually be sufficient for most people. You just have to keep in mind that when you have a 118 kilowatt hour battery pack at the bottom, a full charge from 0 to 100% with an 11 kilowatt onboard charger will take around 12 hours. And that time can be halved if you have a 22 kilowatt onboard charger. But of course, that requires that the charger you have available can also deliver 22 kilowatts. A home charger usually can't do that, and it does cost quite a bit to have it upgraded to handle that. Another thing is that this car here is the 450 plus variant. It's the most popular variant of the EQS in Denmark. There actually is a variant that's a bit cheaper and starts just under 1 million kroner, also with rear-wheel drive, but it also has a smaller battery. In my opinion, the 450 plus is the right combination, and it's the one I would choose, even if I won the big Eurojackpot prize. This gives you a 265 kilowatt motor on the rear axle, equivalent to 360 horsepower and 568 Newton meter. It's a permanent magnet motor, and it runs through a reduction gear, single speed from 0 to the top speed of 210 kilometers an hour in the same gear. Factory specs say it does 0 to 100 in 6.2 seconds, and that's more than enough for a car like this. So, let's try driving a bit too fast. Then that sound comes. It's not particularly intrusive, but boom, one press and it's gone. And overall, I would say that the car's ADAS systems are really not very intrusive. They're really easy to deal with. And I'll also talk a bit about the assistance systems in just a moment. It's incredibly impressive how forgiving this car is. It's truly a relaxing vehicle to drive. I'm behind the wheel of the EQS, and let me just emphasize that this is a car I borrowed from the Danish Mercedes importer. There is no money involved between us. They have no influence on what I say or think in this video. They won't see this video before it gets uploaded. So how does this car actually drive? The EQS, well, it's really set up for maximum comfort and relaxation. And let me just put it this way. This is honestly the best, or possibly the second best, most impressive car that I have ever experienced driving in my entire life since I turned 18 years old, without a doubt. Well, it's not a sporty car, it really isn't. But the comfort and the smooth, refined way you experience this car, it is absolutely insane. It is completely worthy of an S-Class, just better, because there are zero vibrations and it's silent. And that's exactly what an S-Class is all about. It has to be as quiet as possible. and it has to give you the ultimate comfort. And that's exactly what you get here. You get that in a BMW i7 as well. I can't decide whether it's the i7 or the EQS that's my absolute favorite car I've ever driven. It has rear axle steering, that's completely standard, just like the air suspension, which is also standard. What in Mercedes lingo is called airmatic. The thing about rear axle steering is that it's electric. That means there's an electric motor, there's a spindle, and there's basically a computer that calculates what the rear wheels should do when I give input to the steering wheel. For example, when I have to go through a roundabout, I barely have to turn the steering wheel. I can just feel how the rear end moves along with the turn. And that's because it almost pivots like a garden tractor or a wheel loader. If you're from West Jutland, you'll know what that is. When you're driving faster, for example, on the highway or on country roads, the rear wheels steer slightly in the same direction as the front wheels. And that also gives you much more directional stability while driving. It works so well. You can, for I think it's around 20,000 krona here in the spring of 2025, add the option for the rear axle steering to turn up to 10 degrees instead of just 4.5 degrees. This one has the standard 4.5 degree rear axle steering, and honestly, that actually works perfectly fine. I wouldn't even consider paying the extra money, and by the way, it's a hardware difference if you choose the 10 degree rear axle steering. Otherwise, I also think it's just a bit too clever a way to make money. However, there is one small thing that can annoy me, and it's a minor detail about this car. Now, it's had this design update where a star has been added to the hood. I've driven a lot of Mercedes cars, and there's always been something special about sitting there and seeing the star while you drive. You can't do that in this one. At least I can't. And I've raised the seat all the way up. I can't see the star, simply because the car has the shape it does. What a shame. Let's also try doing a braking test. I'm driving on a bone-dry road on a beautiful spring day here. I'll just take the car up over 80 kilometers per hour. Then I'll just check that there's no one around me. 3, 2, 1. Wow, 23 meters. And that's on winter tires. Mind you, in 17 degrees Celsius. Maybe it's about time this car got some summer tires. This is also an exceptionally quiet cabin. This car, it actually comes with this glass roof, and there are some shades that you can close for both the front and rear glass roofs just by pressing a button. It looks pretty cool when it does that, but I can't do it right now because the cameras are mounted on the ceiling with suction cups. So they have to stay open, and you can actually hear a bit better sound insulation when they close, but now I'll try to be quiet for a moment, and let's try to measure what the noise level in the cabin actually is. .57.5 decibels. Yeah, that's really impressive. I think I've only had one car over the years that got down to 55 decibels, but that was with some slightly older measuring equipment I used back then. So I think this is at least, if not the best, then among the very best I've ever measured. Now, about the headlights, I'd like to talk about them too. As mentioned, this car has digital lights, and at the moment, the only way to get them is as part of, I believe it's called the advanced package. And I think it costs around 115,000 or something like that. And with that, you also get these digital lights. So in addition to this welcome and farewell greeting, it can also be made with, among other things, the zebra and Mercedes logos out on the asphalt. It can project other animations onto the road if needed. The light output from these headlights is absolutely, truly phenomenal in every possible way. I would also say that the headlight control is the best I have ever experienced. It places a square over oncoming cars and a small square over the car in front of you. No one flashes their lights at you, and you just have this steady artificial daylight right in front of you as you drive along the road. It's just amazing. Then there are the assistance systems, and I'd like to show you a clip where I talk about the assistance systems while driving on the highway. The press car in the video is equipped with the Driver Assistance Package Plus, which is close to perfect. The car has a well-functioning steering wheel sensor, excellent auto steering, nearly smooth adaptive cruise control, and adaptive traffic sign recognition that adjusts speed before entering a new zone, though without the option to systematically drive over the speed limit. But a special feature can only be demonstrated on the highway. What I want to show you now is a very special feature that this car has. It's a feature that is also found in the new Mercedes E-Class. Right now, I'm driving behind the car here, behind the Renault, and I can see that in the left lane, there's a car coming up from behind, and the Mercedes is aware of that. So it lets this car pass first. I just have my hand on the steering wheel. I'm not doing anything else. Then the white Polo passed by, and now the car is assessing the situation. Boom, it pulls out. Now the question is whether it will also overtake the Polo. I think it will. And then the car moves a bit to the right again. I'm not doing anything. It should be said, though, that it works best when traffic is light. When traffic is heavy, you need to turn it off. There are 4.9 stars out of 5 for the assistance systems in the EQS, only surpassed by the BMW i7, which just has that feature where you can define whether you want to drive a bit faster than the speed limit. I would really like to have that feature in this car as well. I'm on Smedegate, where I do my Rattle tests. Smedegate is an old medieval-style street with uneven cobblestones. And of course, I intend to drive over these cobblestones at about 15 kilometers per hour to see how this car handles it. I'm setting the car to comfort mode. That should give the suspension the softest possible setting, and then I'll drive at about 15 kilometers per hour. Let's see how it handles that. This is a true EQS. The EQS, possibly one of the best cars in the world. Engineering of absolute world class. Of course, there will be another video with this car. A video where I dive into this car's party trick, namely its range and long-distance capabilities. I'm going to do my Odense challenge. I'll be comparing it to the i7 as well, but actually also to the current record holder in my Odense challenge. Of course, I'll also be looking at how the software works, how the car charges when it's allowed to plan the charging stops itself. All of these things I'll be diving into, and I can already promise you, because I've already filmed part of that video, it's definitely worth watching. Do you like the design? I'm a fan. I think this is a stunningly beautiful car, and as I mentioned, in my opinion, electric, fossil, whatever, this is in my top 3 of the best cars in the world right now. Right here, there's a video about electric cars. Over here, I'm standing with finger guns, pew pew. You can click there if you'd like to subscribe to my channel for free. Remember, there are exciting links in the description, and the best way to support me is by using my partners. Also, take care of yourself and each other on YouTube, and most importantly, be respectful in the comments. Hey,